Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. Today we are jumping on a plane and heading out to Hawaii to discuss Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which falls at number 10 on the 50 best rom-coms list. I'm bringing in some strong East Texas blood to the podcast today to counteract all the man tears that occur in this film. So I'd like to welcome in a longtime Longview, Baylor, and Fort Worth friend of mine, Cody Cofer. How are you doing?
I am great. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, did I miss anything there? I try to get like a three-facet thing there of how long we've known each other.
Kind of forever.
Yeah.
That doesn't make a trilogy. It's not three, but just someone that you've known pretty much forever.
Yeah. Well, I know we've known each other for a long time and we've had a bunch of conversations about stuff. But I was trying to think about it, and I don't know if we've necessarily really talked much about like movies or entertainment type of stuff, but like, do you consider yourself a big movie fan or movie buff or?
Yeah, I'm a big movie fan. I always have been. It started really with my dad, who I would, go visit. And he and I, as one of our activities every other weekend, we would go see a movie together pretty much every weekend. And so, it's just a great experience for me to go and share this with my dad. And we saw everything from the latest Arnold Schwarzenegger film to we both cried in Titanic, and so that sort of love of film has followed me for the rest of my life.
Oh, that interesting. So I don't know if I would necessarily peg you as like a romantic comedies type of guy, but do you just mentioned, I mean, Titanic's definitely not a comedy, but like, do you like the genre?
Absolutely love romantic comedy. I really like every kind of film, and I'm looking for the best or the most entertaining in every kind of film. But I do love romantic comedy. It's one of my favorite genres, and which is handy because it's movies that I can watch with my wife, so we don't have to
Right.
fight over the remote as much.
Exactly. I know Whitney's really enjoying us going through this list because even though she hasn't necessarily watched all the movies with me, but like this one, she's like totally content with me like throwing on and like, she can fall asleep. She gets mad at me with like certain movies. Sometimes she's like, I can't fall asleep while you're watching this zombie apocalypse show or whatever it might be. So,
Yeah, we sort of fight over the movie choice from time to time, but when she's being indulgent, that's when we watch my superhero films like the
mhm.
MCU, or you just mentioned my personal favorite genre of any fiction, and that's apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic. So she'll indulge me and watch those shows from time to time, but yeah, rom-com is something that we can agree on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, to set up a little bit today's film, I think it's a pretty popular film that probably most people have seen, but Forgetting Sarah Marshall is directed by Nicholas Stoller, who is also known for Get Him to the Greek, 5 Year Engagement, Neighbors, which is a really funny movie, and the recent box office flop Bros that came out this past fall. Or maybe it was the summer. Yeah, kind of late summer. But this film stars Jason Segel, Kristen Bell, Mila Kunis, and Russell Brand. The film, which was written by Segel and co-produced by Judd Apatow, was released by Universal in April of 2008. The story revolves around Peter Breder, who is a music composer for a TV show that happens to feature his girlfriend Sarah Marshall in the lead role. After a 5-year relationship, Sarah abruptly breaks up with Peter. Devastated by this event, he chooses to go on vacation to Hawaii in order to try to move forward with his life. Trouble ensues when he runs into his ex on the island as she is on vacation with her new boyfriend. Obviously, this was a movie you wanted to talk about. So, is this like, did you see it when it came out, or has this always been a favorite of yours?
Well, Nathan, you sent me the list to choose from real late, so all the movies I really wanted to talk about were taken, and I no, this was a movie that I saw in the theaters in 2008. I actually saw it with my girlfriend, and I went on to marry that girl. She's my wife now. But we were at a time in life when we were studying a lot. We weren't going to the movies. We weren't watching a lot of television. So we were kind of unaware of what was happening at the movie theater, what was popular. This is Judd Apatow. He's really come on the scene in a big way, shaping comedy. But we were pretty unaware of all that and went and saw this movie not having any expectation, and we're rolling in the aisles laughing. So it was just one of those great movies where you go in very cold and it just knocks you back with the humor. And I think it also ages well. I rewatched it with my wife and we both laughed the entire time.
Yeah, maybe save a few like maybe technology type of things that are in this movie. You're right. It feels very timeless. Like there's not much about it to me that would make it feel like. I mean, at this point, I mean, it's not quite 20 years, but around 15 years or so. It does feel like something that could still like come out today, and not feel too too dated. Now, I don't know how many people like have access Hollywood on their TV all the time, but but it's definitely a show that's still around. If it's not that, it's TMZ or something, I guess.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah, like you, I've always been a big fan of Judd Apatow, and even though he didn't necessarily direct this, I think he definitely was a producer on this, and it was a film that kind of spawned off. If there wasn't 40-year-old virgin, like just kicked off a string of these type of movies that are comedies, probably a little bit more emotional, deeper than most comedies are, but also kind of known for their length. But because this one I think is almost about 2 hours, but it's just these type of movies I've just always enjoyed. I like if it's funny. I don't care that it's 2 hours, 2 hours
Right.
long. And yeah, it definitely, I mean, that it kind of died off there, but I mean, there was a lot of movies like this, knocked up, and you would see similar actors in them. I think even like Role Models, and then like I Love You Man, Paul Rudd and
Super Bad.
Yeah, Super Bad, all those, but all those movies, I think I could always throw on and watch. I've always enjoyed those, but yeah.
So I saw something about Judd Apatow giving Jason Segel some advice in writing the movie. And his initial advice, I think, was something along the lines of, your first draft that I want you to turn over to me should be a drama. And we're funny guys. We'll make it funny later, but be sure it has the narrative and the story that people are going to care about. And I really think that's the reason you can make it the 2 hours, is because there's really a good story narrative there that Jason Segel captured.
Yeah, you're right. If this movie didn't have a comedy element to it, it probably would still work just on the story, because it's really, I mean, I'm sure there's other movies that I'm not thinking of, but I mean, this movie really just taps into an experience that I think everybody goes through in life, no matter, I mean, it might not necessarily be a 5-year relationship, but I think anybody has gone through a breakup before and can relate to that. And I don't know if you can. I mean, I know there's probably other movies that deal with like breakups of some sort, but I don't think quite to this depth. And even probably even having the male protagonist as the one who's really going through this, so to speak.
Yeah, there are, of course, several breakup movies, but it usually doesn't make up the entire movie, and it usually doesn't follow the male perspective, and it certainly doesn't portray the male perspective in this way, the blubbering, the crying, and that sort of thing. That's one of the things that makes Jason Segel so great, is he definitely is an accessible leading man.
Yeah, and I kind of almost forgot, and and even as I say this, like how much he has been in our lives as an actor. We just started the new Apple TV Plus series Shrinking that he stars in. Harrison Ford's in that. And then so it is kind of funny that we started that, and then we've done this movie, kind of weird timing, but I'm like, oh yeah, How I Met Your Mother, then like I Love You Man, even the Muppet movie. Like
Yeah.
I mean, he's almost like kind of a surprising leading man, because I mean, I don't think he's necessarily like a bad looking guy. He's definitely not the epitome of like, who you mentioned, like Schwarzenegger earlier. But I mean, I guess that makes him what, he's very relatable,
Yeah.
You can see, you can see yourself. I don't know. I've never quite eaten a full box of cereal in a bowl before, but I'm pretty sure the idea might have crossed my mind at some point in my life.
Right.
So you've always liked him as an actor?
Yeah, this may have been the first time that I noticed him was this movie, and
Mhm.
then I was a late watcher of How I Met Your Mother, but he was fantastic in that. You know, just such a likable guy, pretty similar character to Forgetting Sarah Marshall and How I Met Your Mother. But yeah, I mean, he just seems like somebody really that you could be friends with, right?
Mhm.
You just want to be. You're like, man, this guy seems so nice and friendly and cool. I want to be his friend.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's in he's always been in that Judd Apatow world. I've always been a big fan of Freaks and Geeks, and I probably explored that series after these movies came out, like because I love Judd Apatow's stuff so much. Like, oh, what did he do? And so he was Seth Rogen was originally on that show, and a couple Lin, yeah, Linda Cardellini was in that show. So a lot of like young actors got their roles. So, he's been doing this a long time. So, I mean, I think this was definitely one of his first big starring roles, but it is kind of
And he
interesting.
didn't he date Linda Cardellini?
Well, what I read, I don't know if this like apparently this movie when he wrote it was based on their relationship. And he said with three other breakups as well. He didn't specify the women, but he also said that like him and Linda Cardellini are still good good friends and stuff like that. But also Kristen Bell was probably doing stuff at this time, and also Mila Kunis. But I think they're really good at their roles in this movie as well.
They were fantastic, and I do have to say that you can tell that Jason Segel was sort of running the ship, and that in that there's this guy that is, like you said, I mean, he's not necessarily an Adonis. I mean, handsome guy, better looking than me, sort of taller than me, cooler career than me. But then he's got these two women who are arguably perfect tens. And then at the time, we have uh, Kunis, who is Jackie on that '70s show, and then Belle, who's coming off of Veronica Mars. Really,
That's
they're
right.
super
Yeah.
cute, doing really great work, and they're such great comedic actresses. I think when you and I were growing up, like through the '80s and '90s, it was very rare for a comedic actress to also be hot. I don't know why that is, but it just, and so it's really great to have two really attractive leading ladies, and they are wonderful comedic actresses.
Yes, they are, but they both have. They definitely, even though this is for sure a comedy movie, I do think they show quite some range in their feelings. There's moments where they have to be completely vulnerable or completely mad or and all those things. And yeah, it's played off really well. So, but yeah, kudos for all the casting and Siegel to be like, I think the two girls that
Yeah.
need to be in these roles. But it's very interesting what I hadn't really thought about it, of them all, basically coming from that TV world, and kind of breaking through with this. And I had forgot about the Veronica Mars thing, so it kind of makes the whole crime show that Sarah Marshall's in kind of even funnier. It's almost like a tongue in cheek, like she's been trying to get out of that world into feature films. So
Yeah, some of the movie I think was autobiographical, at least in spirit of Jason Segel, and I do think there's some of that for Belle and her character. I don't know if it was intentional, but I think some things might have lined up.
Yeah, and I think Russell Brand is cast like perfectly in this role, just as the new boyfriend that comes in that you hate, but is also like cool as well. But I think before I let you go into this, first I wanted, are you a Russell Brand fan? And I want to say that also, I think it's funny. I think Russell Brand is a person who like, you're going to have to work, like as my kids get older and they might see him in something going like, who in the world is this? And it was like, there was definitely a moment in America's time where Russell Brand was like the thing or whatever like that. But have you liked him, or do you like him as an actor?
I do like him as an actor. I feel like this movie had just about all I could handle of him. If there would have been a drop more, it would have been too much. But I do his role, and his performance were fantastic, hilarious. And I didn't know who he was before this movie, and I've not really followed his career. You see him pop up every now and again, but like you said, it was at this time everybody went crazy about him, and of course that's a big part of the reason I think that you have the somewhat sequel to this that get him to the green.
Yeah, which I saw, but honestly, I don't remember anything about it at all.
I
So
I remember there's a like a miniature giraffe. That's the only thing I remember about the entire movie.
yeah, I've seen him kind of randomly like pop up in some things every once in a while, like almost real like small supporting roles, but he's fit really well in them. I can't place him right now, but yeah, I definitely like if it if you can stand his like presence and his cadence, like some of his stand-up specials. I mean, he's a really smart guy. He kind of, he's actually pretty intellectual at bringing, kind of social issues to like kind of the type of comic who's like, why haven't we ever explored this more? But he had a show on FX too that I remember that came out. And I can't even remember the name of it, but I liked it, but it was pretty much gone as soon as it started. But yeah, he's definitely cast really well. But yeah, if Hallie ever sees him in a movie later on in life, I'm gonna be like, yes, he starred in a remake of Arthur. It's like, yeah, this guy at one point thought he could, he was basically billed as like a leading man. So, but
it just comes to me that he was in something I saw recently and absolutely didn't recognize him. It was like a mystery film, and I was surprised, and I thought he had a really great
oh
performance.
yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Was it like a death on the Nile or something like
Yes, I
that?
think that was it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't
So
realize until I didn't, and that was a really great movie. I didn't realize until halfway through the movie that that's Russell Brand.
yeah, but yeah, kind of going back to like this movie and just the core of like kind of getting into whether you're male or female, you've gone through breakups before, and I think the moments of awkwardness of when you for the first time run into an ex in a social setting, I think it just hits the beats and the tones like perfectly.
It does.
So yeah, I can't trace to like a specific story or whatever, but there's just so many moments that just hit to the core. And I really like in this movie how both him and Sarah Marshall have these flashbacks of moments of their relationship, both good or bad. Like, when she's thinking about like all the times he basically was holding like her purse for her, or like the moment where he was like trying out his song. I like those little moments because I feel like we do that in life with, when you're trying to get through that kind of broken relationship, you go back to those little moments in your head. And I liked how those played out in this movie. Could you connect to any of those
Yeah,
moments?
absolutely. Well, first, the flashback and the montages that they use were great. I thought a lot of people really bash the use of the flashback as being a lazy narrative device, that sort of thing. But when you want to keep fast pace, funny movie going, you can't break it down to have a long exposition. And so I think the flashbacks were used really well in this, and the few montages they have, like at the end, whenever he's sort of getting his act together, and it doesn't drag us through a year of him having to rebuild. But yeah, I can think of instances in with my own relationships where maybe even my decision to beg Aaron to take me back, and which ended up turning into an engagement and marriage, of those sort of flashes where you go through the catalog of just how wonderful this person was and all the things you share with them. So that felt real in the way that we sort of remember things, and I thought it was a great way to develop the characters without getting too bogged down.
Yeah, and I really like that moment where him and Sarah are having kind of a sit down talk, and she's finally kind of throwing back on him that maybe he wasn't like perfect in the relationship, and that's a good. I like. I think this script is a very like vulnerable script. I mean, including him being fully nude at the beginning and end of this movie. I mean, how vulnerable can you get? But I did like that moment where you start, it kind of turns and it even uses those flashbacks again to show, where she's like, hey, where were you going in life? You were so lazy. You didn't wanted to go out. And they were showing all those funny moments of him by himself in the house, including the Lord of the Rings reference. But yeah, I felt like those were utilized really well. But also I really liked how this movie, it's not trying to paint Peter as the perfect guy, like also that he's a very like faulty character himself.
Everybody was so likable in the movie. And I always say that villains, and I don't know that there's really a villain, obviously there's the one in the title, but I don't know there's really a villain in this movie. But I always say villains, they have to have something that you can relate to and connect to so that you can sort of see yourself. And that makes them all the more despicable because it brings on an element of self-loathing. All the characters in this were just really likable. And so you sort of hate Sarah Marshall at the beginning, but then, yeah, the scene you're talking about where she unpacks, like, look, man, you weren't the greatest. I was trying really hard. And she describes all these things that really seem out of character for who we've known of her in the movie. And then but we also have where they sit down and they talk about the cancellation of the show. And she goes through the same sort of flashbacks with him about how great and supportive he's been. And you also, the shirt flashback was great, where Russell Brand is just real upset that he's wearing that shirt. And then she thinks about all the stupid things that she has bought, over the years, and how Peter just was proud. Like, he was proud of his stupid hat and his man purse because his girlfriend gave it to him. The flashbacks were really great. And I think, it just gave us a lot more to the characters, a lot more meat on the bone.
Yeah. And I also like how with anything in life, we always focus, you put yourself, number one. And I like how also, so like when you're going through this thing and then you're seeing your ex and they look so happy and stuff. And I like how the relationship between Sarah and Aldous Snow kind of goes out of control a little bit, because obviously, like what's on the surface doesn't mean that like everything's perfect or peachy or whatever like that. So I like how they that kind of self-destructs in its own way, just to show that, like, yeah, even though she looked happy initially, that was a relationship that was gonna falter at some point in life. So but I do like how Aldous Snow is just like, whenever things finally like kind of got real for him, he was he was out, he was bailing. So yeah,
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, because he wasn't going to change into who she wanted, and he could see this is not going to work. It sounds kind of deep for Aldous Snow, but we have very different values. There's no point in us trying to fight through this. We're in different places in our lives. We have different values. It's better just to be done now and let us move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of us have hung in there on relationships when we should have been a little more like Aldous and be like, all right, I'm out. Sorry, I'm gonna call a car.
Yeah. And I like the moment where she's basically like, all that stuff, you actually really believe that? And he's like, yeah. And when it's like, oh, this whole thing is not it's not quite as an act as I thought it was.
Right.
He has these core values. No matter what you think of his core values, yeah, he's definitely not straying from that. And so, yeah, we've always said, and we try not to become the old people to the younger friends that we have in life who might be going through relationships. But we've always said, and it was true for me and Whitney, that like we've always said, like when you can be your true self with like somebody else and that person accepts you for who you are, you don't have to do all the pretending or whatever like that. It's that if you can be your true self, and someone loves you for that, that's where the true connection can be. And the sooner you can do that, like with each other, the better.
Not to get too deep and existential and weird about it, but I 100% agree with what you said. I think Peter also shows us at the end with the, sort of with the nudge and the help of Rachel, that to be able to engage in true love, to be your true self, you have to have a true self. You have to have something to give up. And so, otherwise a relationship is just codependency. And I think Peter's character shows that he figures out what he wants, who he wants to be. And as far as we can tell, with a super happy ending, Rachel accepts that. But it wasn't just about finding the right person, Rachel, because he did that in Hawaii, right? He had to go out and figure out who he was so that he had a true self to be. And I think that's really the greatest part of the movie's message.
Yeah. Do you like the Dracula musical that he that he puts on?
I would have gone to see it. I would definitely go and see it as a live performance. It's not my style. I mean, but I found it pretty
funny. I know Whitney. I feel like we saw this in the theater when it came out, but for whatever reason, she didn't really remember this movie too much. But she was the Dracula stuff didn't work for her too much. But I was like, we're a big fan of. Well, I've always loved the Muppets, but you can kind of see the little breadcrumbs that were leading up to that in this movie, and even he's playing the Muppet Show theme song on the piano at one point or whatever like that. And so, just because that was actually, even though Hallie was like a baby or one when that Muppet movie came out, that was the Muppets. That was like the first official movie that we took her to. So I might have a little bit more emotional ties to that movie than some people. But
when I saw Forgetting Sarah Marshall, I didn't realize that, or didn't know that Jason Segel had written it. And when he's doing the Dracula song, I thought to myself, what kismet, what amazing luck that someone wrote this movie for someone to come and do this Dracula voice and play the piano, and then Jason Segel's able to just come in and kill it. Like, how does that even happen? And then I was like, oh, okay. Like, so he had this in mind.
Yeah. He definitely kind of embodies a Muppet, like, and just in his look and everything. So, I don't know if this is the most quotable movie ever, but were there any like quotes that stood out, or like some of your favorite quotes?
I felt like there were a lot of great quotes that probably you can't carry into everyday life, but
right.
We haven't really talked about Kunu, Paul Rudd's character, who's just a gem. And when they're out there during the surf lesson with no waves, sitting on the boards talking, and his advice is something to the effect of, when life gives you lemons, just say fuck lemons and bail. And it's just this great island wisdom, just go with the flow. But Kunu was a wonderful bit of flavor in the film.
Oh, for sure. I've always been a huge fan of Paul Rudd, like most people, but yeah, I think he's wonderful in this movie. And even when they meet up again, and Peter is like, hey, he acts like he hadn't met him before that moment. And I love it. It was just, I mean, I feel like it was probably improvised, but just even when he sings, "Oh, the weather outside is weather."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like the setup you got there. I know the listeners can't see it, but around your keyboard, are those sad tissues or happy tissues?
I had that written down. I don't want to disclose which, so, but that's real fun. And I mean, it's not the most quotable, but when Peter and Sarah see each other in that hotel lobby, and he said, "Peter, what are you doing here?" And he goes, "Well, I'm here to murder you." I like how that awkwardly plays out. But yeah, Kuno for sure has, I think, most of the lines for sure. But are there any favorite scenes that you have from this movie?
The best scene, I think, is the dinner scene with both couples, because you have a lot of character development, but also the plot is furthered really quickly as far as realizations that the characters make. And then you also have the Jonah Hill bit where he like, throws his tantrum or whatever, but he can't yell because he doesn't want to get fired. That I think was my favorite scene. It was just hilarious. It was, I think, well done, well paced.
Yeah. Yeah,
There are a
and
lot of
if any, I think that scene almost really epitomizes a Apatow type of stamp on it. I really feel like, these moments of like awkwardness, but just like where it sits. And I mean, and it's hard, especially in comedy movie or any movie for that part, just to have moments where it's just quiet and the dynamics that happen amongst that dinner. Yeah, it's I think a really well written scene, and it's definitely the turning point for a lot of the characters. I mentioned the quick flashbacks. And I like the whole surfing scene with Peter and Aldous Snow, where I like how Aldous like starts talking about like he listened to some of Peter's stuff and the way he described his music, and Peter's like basically like, damn it, that's exactly what I'm going for. And I like that moment of kind of connection, even though they still have a rivalry, but then he knocks knocks Aldous out on the surfboard, and then the choral scene, that just string of like events I've always really liked. I like how Peter like passes out when he sees the blood. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a hilarious scene, and one that I kind of relate to, just how he accidentally knocks him out. And of course, from Aldis's perspective, it's like, oh, this guy's trying to kill me. I mean, he doesn't really express that, but I mean, that would be the obvious conclusion. But yeah, it's a great scene, and I think it, on the serious side of the scene, kind of is insightful. Whoever your ex is into, they're going to the next person with the same taste that they had for the most part whenever they chose you. So a lot of times there is a lot of commonality in the next guy or the next girl. But yeah, I mean, it is pretty hard. Like Aldous does seem to be pretty cool. I mean, super douche, but nonetheless, like, so comfortable in his own skin, pretty cool.
Yeah, and I also think the cliff scene between Peter and Rachel is really good. I mean, it seems like you definitely have gone through like a lot of share of your hikes lately. I've seen like on social media and stuff, but like how they hike up to that cliff, and just the moment where it comes up, him hanging from that cliff, I think is pretty funny. So, but it's
and then we get the kiss, right? He gets in the water, and then we have the first kiss. I mean, it's a great scene, and also it mirrors the conversation that he has with Sarah Marshall when she's talking about him staying on the pier, and he's like, no, give me another chance, I'll jump in, and then we have this hyperbolic version of that with Rachel. I mean, there's a lot, I think, in this movie. They do a great job of some callbacks, foreshadowing, and then symmetry. You mentioned earlier the nude breakup scene at the beginning, and then the nude happily ever after scene at the end. I mean, I just love that symmetry that the movie does.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think of like how hard it would be to tread water and kiss like that. But
I think about that every time. Like movies, people can tread water for so long, and I'm like 20 seconds, and I have to get to a rock or the side or something. I'm certainly not, but I mean, it's all there are a lot of things that happen in movies, like the empty coffee cup, the love making, against the wall, like picking someone up, just mere mortals are not equipped to do.
Right, exactly.
Movie musings.
First question, you even kind of made reference to this scene, but do you own a Tommy Bahama shirt?
I own several shirts that could have been made by Tommy Bahama. I'm in the phase of life where I embrace dressing like a dad, a little ironically, a little bit to be mean to my kids and wife, to embarrass them. But the real secret is I just kind of like the style. So yes, I have a lot of Aloha shirts in the closet.
I love in the movie when that older man sees Aldous Snow and he kind of like winks at him just because they both have the same shirt on, and I just love that because it's already like such a sensitive subject to him, and that just like takes it over the top for him. That's a really good moment. So, yeah, I don't think I own too many Hawaiian type of shirts, but it's a place I've never visited. So anyway, I'm hoping.
Oh, you've got to go. It's beautiful. We went there for our anniversary, or 10-year anniversary a couple of years ago. And so kind of like the movie, I went there not having any real expectations, and it's a gorgeous place. We went to, the Volcano National Park, and it's kind of like nothing you've ever seen before. So highly recommend it. And that's another thing that was great about this movie is the retreat to Hawaii for 2 hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No kidding. Especially in this cold weather, especially for you all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in Fort Worth. But maybe going. You don't have to incriminate anybody here, but like there might be a moment, or I just was wondering what's the worst breakup that you've ever been through.
I don't know that I have a breakup that I felt like I went through such a destructive, terrible time as being in the fetal position and crying like Peter. Certainly some that hurt, but I'm curious if I had kind of a breakup when you and I were seniors in high school, or actually I guess it was right. It might have been after our first year of Baylor. That's what it was. But I was back in Longview, and we had a breakup, and then for the entire summer, my ex-girlfriend just followed me around Longview, the town, like all summer long, and created all kinds of scenes and drama. It was pretty ridiculous for small town East Texas, but that was the most dramatic breakup.
Not many places you can hide there.
No. I tried to hide in all of them, and I couldn't find a safe spot. But
yeah, if you want to go,
she's wonderful. She's doing well. She grew up, matured, and I think she has lived happily ever after, as far as I know.
Yeah. Like you, yeah, I've definitely never gone through such a long relationship as Peter, like 5 years, and then a breakup. Luckily, it's more so looking back now and going like, why did I react like that to such a short-term relationship? I never like went to Hawaii to escape from it all, but I think I definitely like explored like different areas that I would not normally had as much, just to kind of, it's like, well, I've never tried this, and now here's my opportunity to try to kind of find answers, to something. But thankfully, I don't think anything as awkward as as you went through in this movie. He, I may mention to it earlier, he eats a lot of cereal in this big bowl. But do you have a favorite cereal that you like?
Fruity Pebbles.
Oh,
Fruity
really?
Pebbles for sure. Yeah. And I've only eaten it a handful of times as a full-on adult, but it's such an indulgence when I have done it. It just makes me so happy. And I think I have done exactly what he does in the movie, get a giant salad bowl and just dump the entirety of it. Because I also know that if I keep it in the house, I'm going to throw it away after I have my bowl and get my fix. So I go ahead and just make the bowl as big as I can. And then, try to eat it fast enough to where the little pebbles still have some crunch.
Do you let your kids eat sugary cereal?
They just don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that great of a parent in the nutrition arena. There's a lot of snacking, a lot of bad habits, but naturally my kids have just made some really great choices. They don't drink sodas completely on their own, just don't have an interest in anything that's bubbly. And they're not really big on cereal. So we have it in the cupboard. So if you come over and you want some cereal, Nathan, you just help yourself. You have fridge privileges at my house. You can go straight to the fridge or the cupboard. But yeah, they don't really eat that.
That's good to know. So you might regret saying that, now that I know that. So
I regret most of our relationship, Nathan, but that's okay for you to come over and have some cereal.
Yeah, but you came on this podcast anyway, so I appreciate that.
Rom-Com Rankings.
By the end of this, we'll see if this movie is number 10 on the list or even higher or lower. Initially, when I saw that it was number 10, it kind of shocked me. But even as we're discussing it right now, it's almost built up higher in my mind, because it got my mind kind of going more than I imagined. I do think the movie is really good as a whole, but I was even kind of surprised. I think the second half of the movie is really, really strong. I think the first half you remember, especially all the minor characters that happen, but I think it does take some emotional depths in the second half that I found real surprising, but really good. But the first category I have is the romantic chemistry between the leads. So how would you rate the chemistry between Jason Segel and Mila Kunis in this movie?
I would rate the chemistry a 4, maybe a 4.5.
Okay.
I compare it to the best on-screen chemistry that I've ever seen. I saw As Good as It Gets in the theater, so I was pretty young. And Jack Nicholson and who's the leading lady in that? I don't even know. I've never said leading lady before in my life. I've said it 8 times in this podcast. I don't know who's the female lead and As Good as It Gets. Anyway, there's a scene at the end when Jack Nicholson, he's in love and he goes out and he kisses her. And as a kid, early adolescent, I saw that and I said, man, that was kind of lackluster. And then he says, I can do better. And he kisses her again and there are fireworks. And I was like, how in the world does an actor do that? So that's my 5 in my mind, the ability to evoke that. And so, but I think this is 4.5. I mean, really great chemistry. You know, the characters do a good job. The relationship is not the same throughout the movie. And so I think they just do a good job of playing off of each other. And even with a comedy going on, you still have the tension. And so
Yeah, no, I would give it 4 stars. And I think almost mainly due to Mila Kunis's performance here. I mean, she is absolutely gorgeous. And she's in these movies and she becomes so relatable. I'm not up on like celebrity gossip, so I don't know who she's really dating in real life, but she somehow makes you believe that she is sensitive enough and carefree enough to end up with this guy who has just produced a Dracula musical.
Yeah, right.
But I think it's mainly due to them. But yeah, I just love I love their interactions and she's almost I think of probably a fairy tale vision that guys might have of the girl they end up with, someone who looks like her, but also totally acceptable of your faults, you know. But it works for whatever reason. So,
well, so it's funny you say that about this fairy tale. When I watch the movie, rewatching movies, I have an eye for, or I'm trying to look for how they age in today's context. And for the most part, there wasn't anything that was over the top, offensive in this. There is this one scene where Mila Kunis or Rachel, and they're going back to the hotel to hook up. He says, "Are you sure you're not too drunk?" And she says, "Don't be so sensitive." And then they go on. That one bit is probably the only thing that wouldn't make it past Me Too censors today, right? But by and large, the movie, I think, ages well in that regard. I kept looking for Mila Kunis to be the sort of the manic pixie dream girl, the girl that doesn't have anything other than to motivate the male protagonist along the way. And I think we don't know much about her. We know that, she dropped out of college, didn't go to college, and she has this crazy. We don't know a lot about her, but I feel like her performance takes her beyond that very superficial character, and the way that she relates with Peter, but also just how likable she is, and I guess strong she is in making her decisions. I think she avoids that. That could have gone the wrong way, I think, in this film.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. She brings, you get the sense that she has gone through this turmoil that Peter has gone through. Now she's she's working on herself, so she's not blabbering on and on about it like he is. But I do like the moment, where she essentially says, "Hey, don't contact me anymore." And I like that aspect of that. Like they truly kind of found themselves before they found each other again.
Yeah.
We'll probably go back to that because I kind of jumped jumped a few categories down. But I know the second category I have is the best friend. There's usually a best friend component in here. I did this on the last podcast. I kind of let the guests dictate this because these movies. I came up with this category before all this started. It's been a little bit harder to nail down. So I think you could say his stepbrother, played by Bill Hader, could be Peter's best friend in this. But there's also there's a slew of friends that he makes in Hawaii. You know, Kunu, who we've talked about, Dwayne the bartender, Chemo, who just is in his room all the time somehow, and Daryl, played by Jack McBrayer. So I'm gonna let you decide: should it just be Bill Hader standalone, or should it be a culmination of all these characters?
I love the Bill Hader scenes. They're super funny, but he is just so negative and mean. And it's funny. It's great. It works. It is one perspective about what's going on in Peter's life and how Peter's dealing with it. But I don't think he really falls into the best friend, or, a lot of times it's sort of the oracle, and so I'm going to have to go with the bartender.
Okay.
I think he acts as the best friend for Peter and also for Rachel. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he provides the soundest advice and the best perspective.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's fair because just as you're saying that, isn't it like even after he leaves, he kind of sticks up to Peter and to Rachel? I don't remember exactly. Yeah,
she goes to him to bash Peter and to be like, "Can you believe this?" And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, she had his penis in her mouth and he stopped her.
Yeah,
like right. That was a Herculean feat. I forget. Oh, he's like Gandhi, but better. He likes puppets. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great line. Okay, so 1 heart to 5 hearts. So what would you give him?
I'll give him a 3 just because not a lot of screen time, not a lot of history with him.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. That's a good solid line for sure. Rating. Okay, so this one's a little bit different too. I always think a great rom-com has a really good soundtrack. I don't know if you had a chance, but I looked up the soundtrack on Spotify, and it's kind of 3 parts. One is just songs of the times, like it opens up with that Cake song. The other third of it are basically Hawaiian covers of popular songs,
which I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other third is the actual original songs that this movie pulls off, both from Aldous Snow, but also from the Dracula musical that we've spoken of, which I always think is a pretty amazing feat to write original comedic song and it works in movies or whatever. But how would you rate this soundtrack?
So pure soundtrack, I'd give it a 2.5. I don't really count the original songs that are part of the story as soundtrack. But they were fantastic, right? But I kind of think of soundtrack as what I would listen to in my car driving down the road. And there's some movies, of course, that have great soundtracks or even scores that I'm just like, man, this is fantastic. But there wasn't really anything that moved me about the song choice apart from the original. Inside of You was pretty moving, but kind of in a different way.
Yeah. I promise you, I'm not just copying you this whole time, but yeah, I'm there with you on this.
I'm hard to disagree with. I'm very insightful, and I'm much like Aldous Snow in that I'm so cool that you just want to identify with me. Yeah, I'm kind of like a gothic Neil Diamond.
I was actually telling Whitney before this recording, I said, I am about to talk to the gothic Neil Diamond. Yeah, no, I'm there with you. Like, I think the original songs are fantastic. Is it something I would just pop on and listen to all the time? No, it works great for the movie. The kind of songs that they are like basically the popular songs of the day, I listen through those aren't really great. I do like I almost think of, it's not on this soundtrack, but the Somewhere Over the Rainbow kind of ukulele version that is so popular in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
when you hear them, they kind of work, but is that something I'm listen to all the time? Probably not, so yeah, I'm there with you. Here's the category I was kind of making reference to, but there always seems to be a chase scene or a declaration of love in a rom-com movie. This one kind of there's not so much a chase, but I guess I don't know if him going back to the bar and ripping her picture down from the bathroom wall is his big declaration of love. But how do you view this category?
I think that is the big declaration of love, and also it gives us the chance to have the second appearance of Branscombe Richmond, the guy that owns the bar, runs the bar, who I think's Hawaiian. And so this goes back earlier. I mentioned one of the reasons I'm so into movies because of the experience of going to the movies with my dad. Something else, a memory that I have, he didn't like a lot of television shows in particular, but he loved the show Renegade with Lorenzo Lamas, and Richmond played Lorenzo Lamas's sidekick in that. Bobby Six Killer was the character's name. So I saw him when I saw him in this movie in 2008 and again, I was like, oh man, it just sort of took me down. But yeah, I think that's the big declaration of love. He goes in, he takes his ass whipping to get the picture to defend her honor. And he did it in a way that was consistent with his character. He didn't fight back. He just tells him, you're going to hit me as many times as you want, but I'm going to take this picture. And I love how it doesn't work. I mean, it's in the mix for probably why, right? But she doesn't say, okay, let's get together. It's a year later, or, when he sends her the flyer of his show, saying what we have been talking about, saying to her, hey, I know who I am now. If you're interested in that guy, come on. Yeah.
So where are you putting it on the scale there?
On the scale, I forgot you didn't mention the scale when you asked the question, but yeah, it is a pretty weak. I think, like you said, it's no high fidelity. I'm just going to give it a 3.
Oh, okay, I gave it 3.5 just because, it's not the most memorable thing in the movie. But like you, I appreciate that that's not the catalyst for them really getting together. But it's almost kind of like, I know they, set it up at the beginning of the movie, and it's almost kind of throws you off a little bit of like, oh wait, why is he going? It's kind of weird that that's like what he went back to in his brain, but he's a guy who doesn't make the best decisions.
And those were not Mila Kunis's real boobs, and so I deducted 1 for that. So it would have been a 4, but I deducted 1 because I found out those weren't real.
Okay. I read that as well, but that wasn't something I got in with Whitney with like, what do you think? Were those really her real boobs? Or so
yeah, that's one of those scenes where you just continue to stare at the screen, like hoping that you don't see your wife or significant other look over at you. You just look indifferent, but you can't look away because then you look guilty.
The last category, and I think it's the one the most important when it comes to romantic comedy, is the rewatchability factor. I feel like I should say my rating just so you don't think I'm copying you the whole time, but I think this is 5 hearts easy. I think this could pop up anytime, and I'd probably sit down and watch more of it, even if I was like really busy or something.
Oh, I'm gonna go 1 heart. I never want to see it again. No,
oh, man.
No, I'm just kidding. I feel like I've just been really too over the top advocating for this movie, but I agree with you. 5 hearts for sure. If it came on TV, I'd stop flipping channels. And, if I were at home, a lot of times when I do my rewatch, it's when I'm at home alone, like when Aaron or the kids are gone and I don't want to watch something that she might want to watch or whatever. So I go to something familiar. It's definitely something that I would put on. And I'm confident that I would hear jokes and see things that I didn't notice before, didn't remember before.
Yeah.
It's just a fast pace,
Yeah. And I think I almost like appreciate this movie even being a little older now. Thankfully, I don't have to go through all the things that these characters go through. But, it reminded me of like how difficult, romantic relationships can be sometimes. And so I think it works on a comedic level, but I do think it's a lot, way more dramatic and more real to life than a lot of things, even though it's a pretty over the top film for sure.
Well, that's what Judd Apatow, and he's even when he's producing, he's very involved in, that's what he's supposed to be. But, his mark and the criticism that I've seen that I tend to sort of agree with, he does delve into the mundane and the normal experience. And that's a great part of his work, but he does it in this generally sort of white, sanitized setting. And, I think how, like, this movie happens in paradise, basically. Right. And, you have these people that have the capacity to go on and have interesting careers and lives and that sort of thing. There's some lack of verisimilitude, but I think that's what allows it to be a good romantic comedy. You sort of take out those other worries, the other strife you got to go through. I'm channeling Jungle Book right now, but anyway, so that's the only negative that I see that I would have for the movie, is that it is a little bit, I guess, out of touch from most experience, but probably very much in touch with the Apatow experience.
that makes perfect sense. Yeah. When I'm having a rough go, I can't just fly out to Hawaii, but
you end up in the Oprah suite or whatever it is. Like,
oh yeah.
That just doesn't happen to me.
Just how that's like given to him. I know that's definitely one moment in the film that you're like, okay.
Recommendations.
Is there any kind of piece of entertainment that you've really been digging lately or really enjoying?
So I always listen to a book and read a book. At night, I read a paper book, and in my car, I listen to something. And so right now, I am listening to Mythos by Stephen Fry.
Okay.
Highly recommend it. It's really just going through the Greek mythology. But, and Stephen Fry, he's a British actor, what we know him from, V for Vendetta, he was her boss. If you've watched much British television or whatever, you would absolutely recognize the guy. But he does the voice performance of the book, and it's so good. And then the book I'm reading now is one of my pleasures. I don't like to call books guilty pleasures, because I think you just read whatever you want to read without regard for what anybody else will think. But whenever I get in a rut, I always go back to a Hap and Leonard book. And I don't know, did you see that show? It was released on Sundance, the channel first, and then I think Netflix picked it up. It had Thomas Jane and oh my gosh, the guy that played Chalky White in Boardwalk Empire.
Sorry, I'm not.
Michael Williams.
Okay.
Who recently passed away tragically, or in 2021 passed away. Anyway, but the books are written by someone else from East Texas, Joe Lansdale, and he's had a couple of adaptations into movies and stuff. Anyway, you can look him up. But so it's like this amateur detective type thing. Hap is a guy that dodged the draft, did a little prison time for it, got pardoned, but he's a hippie. And then his brother, so Hap's a white dude, and then his brother, for all intents and purposes, is Leonard, who is a homosexual, just badass conservative. And they find themselves into these different pickles in East Texas. It's just really entertaining. I mean, it's pretty lowbrow literature, let me tell you, but it's comforting and entertaining. I love it. If you like detective stuff, if you like sort of sophomoric humor from time to time, I highly recommend it.
Okay. And no, that's good. No, I've been trying to get into reading more this year. And so, those are great recommendations. The one that I don't know if you're a big fan of stand-up comedy, but one of my favorites recently, his name's Nate Bargatze. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah,
before?
I have.
Yeah, so he just came out with a new special called Hello World on Amazon Prime. You can find a lot of his stuff on Netflix. But anyway, he's from Tennessee. He's kind of got a slow drawl about him a little bit. And maybe that's why I connect to him a little bit, being from East Texas. But anyway, I just watched it the other night. And if people haven't checked out his stuff, I think he's worth checking out. The material he did, we actually saw him. He came to the Oklahoma City, I guess it was last year, and it was a makeup tour for he was originally supposed to come during COVID and pandemic, so it got canceled. And so anyway, I had heard all the material before in this special. I didn't realize it was going to be the same stuff. But anyway, I think he's pretty hilarious. So if people like stand-up comedy, I think you should check him out. And anyway, he's pretty clean too. So if
I was going to say he works clean, which is tough to do, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and honestly, when I've seen his stand-up on Netflix, I have thought of you on occasion.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it just seems like the kind of humor that you would be into, and generally, you try not to go too blue and with your personal humor and your taste, and so I genuinely, I thought of you and your cousin Greg Ross.
Well, I guess his name's Nate, so maybe there's the connection there also. But yeah,
that was it.
Yeah. So that's hilarious. Well, so next week on the show, we are going to discuss number 41 on the list. Actually, my niece is coming on, and she lives in Fort Worth, actually. But we're going to talk about She's the Man, starring Amanda Bynes and Channing Tatum, which it's one of the few films on this list that I've never seen. She's in her mid 20s, so I think maybe this is more of a movie she grew up watching or whatever. So it should be interesting. Have you ever seen that movie?
I have not seen that movie. I missed that one. And I love Channing Tatum. I think he's great. Amanda Bynes, I don't have anything bad to say about. So, maybe it would be a movie I'd enjoy.
Yeah, it came out in 2006, so 2 years before Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So it's probably something I didn't take into consideration at the time. So anyway, but I'm excited. Kind of a new movie. I always like seeing new movies, so it'll be interesting to explore that one. So anyway, people always can visit our website, moviesaurelife.com, for reviews and past episodes and more stuff. Thanks for coming on and doing this. So this is fun. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate it.
This was so much fun. Really, I've been looking forward to this since you sent out a message asking about it. I've really been looking forward to this. One, just to spend some time with you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But also, like I said, I love movies, and this movie is a great one. So
hopefully we'll talk again sooner than later.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having me.